High Commander Thisara blazed with furious red energy as she watched another of her crystal ships crumble under human kinetic fire. The Vextai had conquered 100 worlds with their superior energy manipulation technology. No species had ever resisted them with such primitive weapons. Sub-Commander Velthar, adapt our shields immediately, she commanded. These matter-based projectiles must not be allowed to penetrate our energy fields. Velthar's crystal form pulsed frantically as he tried to modify their defensive systems. High Commander, our shields are designed to absorb and redirect energy attacks. We have no experience with solid matter traveling at such velocities. Then learn quickly or we will all become space dust. The Vextai fleet began restructuring their energy shields, trying to create barriers that could stop physical objects. But each time they adapted their defenses, the humans changed their attack patterns. Captain Jihoon Kang's mining ships were now firing missiles that split into smaller projectiles just before impact. When the Vextai shield stopped those, the humans switched to weapons that fired streams of liquid metal that hardened on contact. Engineering Officer Yuna Han, Captain Jihoon called out, "What's our ammunition status?" "We're building new rounds faster than we can fire them, Captain," Yuna replied with excitement. "The fabricators are creating weapon types the aliens have never seen. Each shot is different from the last." This was the genius of humanity's approach. The Vextai were trying to solve the problem like scientists, creating perfect defenses against specific threats. But humans were fighting like engineers, constantly building new solutions faster than anyone could adapt to them. Captain Hyunwoo Cha watched from his position aboard the Taeguk as the crystal ships struggled with their chaos tactics. Through the neural network, he was receiving real-time data from every human ship in the battle. The artificial intelligence was analyzing Vextai responses and suggesting new attack methods every few seconds. "Dr. Jimin Lee," Hyunwoo said to his chief engineer, "the AI is recommending we try adaptive armor now. Are the conversion systems ready?" Jimin checked his instruments and smiled. "Captain, we're about to show these energy beings something they've never seen before." The Taeguk and 5 other heavy cruisers suddenly changed course and headed directly toward the largest Vextai ships. High Commander Thisara watched them approach and prepared to demonstrate the true power of energy-based weapons. "All ships, focus fire on those approaching vessels," she commanded. "Show these primitives what happens when matter meets pure energy." The Vextai unleashed their most powerful weapons. Beams of concentrated energy that could melt asteroids struck the human ships at full force. Thisara expected to see the crude metal vessels vaporize instantly. Instead, something impossible happened. The human ships absorbed the energy attacks completely. Their hulls began to glow brighter and brighter as they converted the alien weapons fire into power for their own systems. The more the Vextai shot at them, the stronger the human ships became. "Impossible," Thisara pulsed in shocked purple light. "Energy cannot be contained by primitive matter." "Actually, it can," Captain Hyunwoo said over the communication channel. "When that matter is designed by humans who studied solar energy conversion for 300 years. Dr. Jimin Lee had based the adaptive armor on technology humans used to harvest energy from their sun. The hull plating could absorb energy attacks and feed that power directly into the ship's weapons and engines. It was simple physics applied in a way the energy-based Vextai had never considered. "All ships return fire," Hyunwoo ordered. The human vessels, now supercharged with Vextai energy, unleashed weapons that were far more powerful than they should have been. But these weren't energy weapons that the aliens could absorb or redirect. They were kinetic cannons powered by the Vextai's own attacks, firing projectiles at speeds that turned simple metal into devastating force. The first Vextai command ship to be hit simply came apart. The crystal structure couldn't handle the impact of matter moving at such incredible velocity, powered by its own energy weapons. The beautiful geometric vessel shattered into 1,000,000 glowing fragments. "Retreat," Thisara commanded her remaining ships. "Fall back and regroup." But Captain Sujin Yang's reconnaissance squadrons were already moving to cut off their escape routes. Her small, fast ships appeared throughout the Vextai formation like ghosts, impossible to target but perfectly positioned to attack. "Pilot Daehyun Ko, begin the swarm attack," Sujin ordered. From her ship and dozens of others, clouds of small fighters launched into space. To the Vextai, they looked like insects, tiny, primitive craft that could barely be worth noticing. This was another fatal mistake. Each fighter was controlled by a human pilot connected to the neural network. They moved in patterns that seemed random but were actually perfectly coordinated. The Vextai, used to fighting logical, predictable enemies, couldn't track movements that appeared to be pure chaos but were actually the result of hundreds of human minds thinking together. The fighters swarmed around the crystal ships like angry bees, too small and fast for the large energy weapons to target effectively. But each fighter carried weapons designed specifically for this moment, devices that disrupted energy coherence at the quantum level. What are those primitive craft doing to our ships? Sub-Commander Velthar asked in panic as his vessel began to flicker and fade. The answer came from Dr. Junho Park, speaking from his laboratory on Luna. We're introducing quantum discord into your energy matrices. Your ships exist as organized energy patterns. We're just making them a little less organized. The quantum discord weapons were humanity's masterpiece of controlled chaos. They didn't destroy the Vextai ships directly. Instead, they introduced tiny amounts of randomness into the aliens' energy patterns. For beings made of pure energy, this was like introducing cancer into a living organism. The crystal ships began to lose their perfect geometric shapes. Their energy fields became unstable. Some ships flickered in and out of existence. Others began to glow with colors that hurt to look at. The Vextai were literally falling apart at the molecular level. High Commander, Velthar's voice was filled with terror. The quantum discord is spreading through our fleet. The energy disruption is contagious. Thaisara realized with horror that her advanced energy-based civilization had a fatal weakness. They were all connected through energy fields. What affected one ship could spread to others. The humans had turned the Vextai's greatest strength into their greatest vulnerability. All ships, emergency phase shift, Thaisara commanded. Break all energy connections. Isolate damaged vessels. But it was too late. The quantum discord had already spread through half her fleet. Crystal ships were losing coherence throughout the formation. Some were breaking apart completely. Others were shifting into energy forms that could no longer maintain consciousness. Commander Yejin Shin watched from her position on the heavy cruiser, Soul's vengeance as the Vextai fleet tried desperately to escape. Through the neural network, she could feel the determination of every human in the battle. They had been called primitive. They had been dismissed as barely evolved. Now it was time to send a message. Dr. Junho Park, Yejin said into her communicator, prepare the quantum cascade bomb. This was humanity's final gift to the Vextai Empire. Not just a weapon, but a statement. Dr. Junho had designed a device that would create a massive quantum discord field, large enough to affect every Vextai ship in the solar system simultaneously. Commander Shin, Junho's voice was serious. Deploying this weapon will require a direct approach to their flagship. The ship that carries it won't survive the mission. Yejin looked around at her crew. Every face showed the same expression, determination mixed with grim satisfaction. They had all volunteered for this mission knowing it was a one-way trip. Understood. Dr. Park, load the device and prepare for final approach. The Soul's vengeance broke from the human formation and accelerated toward High Commander Thaisara's flagship. The crystal ship was enormous, blazing with desperate energy as it tried to rally the remaining Vextai fleet. Primitive humans, Thaisara broadcast on all frequencies. You cannot defeat a civilization that has mastered the fundamental forces of the universe. You're right, Commander Yejin replied calmly. We can't defeat you with advanced technology. That's why we're using primitive methods. The Soul's vengeance flew directly into the Vextai flagship's energy field. The ship's hull began to melt under the intense energy bombardment, but the adaptive armor absorbed enough power to keep the engines running just long enough. For humanity, Yejin shouted as she triggered the quantum cascade bomb. The explosion wasn't visible in the normal spectrum of light. Instead, reality itself seemed to ripple outward from the detonation point. Every Vextai ship in the solar system suddenly began to lose coherence simultaneously. Their perfect energy forms became chaotic storms of uncontrolled force. Within minutes, the entire Vextai Armada had either been destroyed or reduced to helpless wrecks drifting through space. The few ships that still maintained enough coherence to move were fleeing the solar system as fast as their damaged energy drives could carry them. High Commander Thaisara floated in the center of her crystalline command chamber. Her body was pure energy, shifting between different colors as her emotions changed. Right now, she glowed a confident blue. The primitive humans had rejected their generous offer, but this was expected. Analysis of human vessels complete. reported Sub-Commander Velthar, his crystal form pulsing with data streams. Their ships are crude metal constructions. Basic fusion drives, primitive plasma weapons, simple deflector shields. Thesara brightened with amusement. As predicted, these creatures still depend on solid matter for everything. Their weapons fire simple energy bursts. Their ships are heavy and slow. They cannot possibly harm our energy form vessels. On the bioship Evolutionary, Hive Admiral Zephyros studied the same data with his collective mind. Unlike the Vextai, the Morden had kept physical bodies, but they had perfected them through genetic engineering. Zephyros had forearms, enhanced muscles, improved reflexes, and a brain connected directly to his ship's biological systems. Human genetic patterns are chaotic, reported bioanalyst Keith Mara, her voice echoing through the ship's neural network. Random mutations, emotional decision-making, individual personalities that conflict with group efficiency. Their fleet formations are disorganized. Zephyros made a satisfied sound, exactly what we expected. These humans still fight as individuals instead of as one perfect organism. Their ships are not grown from superior biomatter. They cannot adapt during battle like our vessels can. Meanwhile, on the human reconnaissance ship Soul's Pride, Captain Su Jin Yang watched both alien fleets through her advanced sensors. Her ship was small and fast, designed for scouting and intelligence gathering. What she was seeing made her both worried and hopeful. Engineering Officer Yuna Han, are you getting these readings? Su Jin asked. Yuna looked up from her sensor station. Yes, Captain. The crystal ships are definitely energy-based, but look at this, they're not scanning our ships very carefully. They're acting like they already know everything about us. What about the bioships? Those are stranger. They're alive, but they seem to follow very rigid patterns. No variation in their formations. It's like they're all thinking the same thoughts. Su Jin nodded slowly. Send all this data to Dr. Minsu Choi on Earth, and add a personal note. Both alien fleets are making the same mistake. What mistake, Captain? They're not really looking at us. They're looking at what they think we are. Back on Earth, Dr. Minsu Choi received Captain Yang's report while standing in the underground research complex, beneath Seoul. The facility was buzzing with activity as scientists and engineers worked around the clock. Dr. Yoonji Song, the head of alien technology research, was examining energy readings from the Vextai ships. Minsu, look at this, Yoonji called out. The crystal ships are powered by pure energy conversion. They turn matter into energy and back again. It's incredible technology. But? Minsu asked. He knew Yoonji well enough to hear the uncertainty in her voice. But they seem to think our weapons work the same way theirs do. They're preparing defenses against energy attacks and matter conversion. They're not ready for kinetic weapons or electromagnetic pulses. Across the lab, engineer Taemin Ryu was studying the bioship data. Dr. Choi, the organic ships are even more predictable. They adapt to threats, but only threats they recognize. Their biological systems follow genetic programming. They can't handle something completely outside their evolutionary experience. Dr. Minsu smiled for the first time since the aliens arrived. So both species are preparing to fight their own technology, not ours. Exactly, Yoonji said. The Vextai think we'll use energy weapons because that's all they understand. The Morden think we'll use biotechnology because that's what they've perfected. But we use neither, Taemin added. We use whatever works. On the command ship of the Vextai fleet, Thesara was reviewing battle plans with her officers. The crystal beings had fought many wars across the galaxy, always winning through superior energy manipulation and technological advancement. The humans have approximately 200 ships in their home system, reported Tactical Coordinator Antes. All are primitive matter-based vessels. Our energy disruptors will phase through their crude shields and destroy their power systems instantly. What about their weapons? Asked Sub-Commander Velthar. Thesara pulsed with confident yellow light. Primitive plasma cannons and missile systems. Our energy fields will absorb the plasma. Our ships can phase to avoid the missiles. This battle will be over in minutes. The Vextai had never fought a species that used purely physical weapons. In their experience, all spacefaring civilizations eventually learned to manipulate energy directly. The idea that humans might stick with primitive kinetic weapons and electromagnetic systems never occurred to them. Meanwhile, aboard the Morden flagship, Hive Admiral Zephyros was making similar assumptions. The bioship's living walls pulsed gently as the collective mind processed tactical data. Human biology is inferior, stated genetic analyst Morthak. Slow reflexes, emotional responses, no collective consciousness. Their ships reflect these flaws, built by individuals, operated by individuals, fighting as individuals. Their biotechnology? Asked Zephyros, non-existent. They still use mechanical systems and crude electronics. When our bioweapons infect their ships, they will have no natural defenses. Our adaptive viruses will shut down their systems in seconds. The Morden had conquered dozens of species by overwhelming their biological defenses with superior genetic engineering. They expected human ships to have organic components that could be infected and controlled. The possibility that humans might have developed purely synthetic countermeasures was beyond their consideration. Back on the human research station orbiting Luna, Dr. Yunji Song was putting the final touches on humanity's response to both threats. Working with her was Dr. Boyoung Chae, a specialist in hybrid technologies. The beauty of being called primitive, Yunji said while calibrating a strange-looking device, is that nobody expects you to have advanced solutions to advanced problems. Boyoung nodded while checking her own equipment. The Vex-Tai energy beings can't understand matter-based weapons because they've evolved beyond matter. The Mordun bio-collective can't understand individual creativity because they've eliminated it from their society. And we, Yunji said with a grin, are too primitive to know that what we're planning is impossible. The device they were working on looked like a cross between a computer, a biological sample container, and a small nuclear reactor. It hummed quietly, processing data through quantum calculations, biological neural networks, and good old-fashioned human intuition all at the same time. Dr. Song called out Lieutenant Dongyuk Seo from the communication station. Admiral Lee wants to know if the special weapons are ready. Yunji looked at her hybrid creation, then at the screens showing both alien fleets moving into final attack positions. The crystal ships were forming perfect geometric patterns, ready to unleash energy weapons that could destroy planets. The bioships were spreading out like living nets, preparing to capture and convert everything in their path. Both alien species had made the same critical error. They had looked at humanity's technology, declared it primitive, and prepared to fight the war they expected instead of the war they were going to get. Tell the Admiral, Yunji said, that the primitive humans are ready to surprise some very advanced aliens. Outside, the two most powerful fleets in the galaxy finished their preparations to crush a species they considered barely evolved. Inside the human ships, engineers and soldiers prepared to prove that sometimes being underestimated was the greatest advantage of all. Captain Jiwan Park stood on the bridge of the Taeguk, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. Earth's defense fleet had been quiet for months. No pirates, no asteroid threats, just peaceful patrols around humanity's home system. That peace was about to end. Captain, shouted Lieutenant Hana Kim from her communication station. I'm getting massive energy readings from the edge of the system. Jiwan turned quickly. What kind of readings? Before Hana could answer, the space in front of them began to shimmer. Huge ships appeared out of nowhere like ghosts becoming solid. But these weren't human ships. They were nothing like anything humans had ever built. The first group of ships looked like they were made of living crystal. They sparkled and glowed with inner light. Each ship was perfectly smooth, with no visible weapons or engines. They moved through space like dancers, graceful and beautiful. The second group was completely different. These ships looked alive, but in a scary way. Their hulls pulsed like giant hearts. Strange tubes and organic-looking parts covered their surfaces. They moved through space like giant sea creatures swimming through water. Admiral Lee needs to see this, Jiwan said. Hana, get me a direct line to Earth Command. Admiral Kyung-Ho Lee appeared on the main screen within minutes. His face was serious but calm. Behind him, the Earth Command Center buzzed with activity. Officers ran between stations and warning lights flashed red. Captain Park, what's your status? Admiral Lee asked. Sir, we have 2 different alien fleets in our system. They just appeared without warning. I count at least 50 ships from each group. Dr. Min-Soo Choi, Earth's top military expert, stepped into view behind the Admiral. Captain, are they showing any hostile behavior? Not yet, sir. They're just waiting, like they're studying us. Suddenly, Hana's station started beeping wildly. Captain, I'm receiving a transmission. It's coming from both fleets at the same time. Put it through, Jiwan ordered. The main screen changed. Two different aliens appeared side by side. The first looked like a being made of living light, constantly shifting and glowing. The second was more solid but clearly not human. It had gray skin, multiple arms and eyes that seemed to look in different directions at once. The light being spoke first. Its voice sounded like music mixed with the sound of breaking glass. "Primitive humans, I am High Commander Thisara of the Vextai Empire. We have watched your species for many cycles." The gray alien spoke next. Its voice was deep and echoed strangely. "I am Hive Admiral Zephyros of the Morden Collective. Your kind has spread beyond your birth world without permission." Admiral Lee stepped forward on his end of the transmission. "I am Admiral Kyung-Ho Lee, speaking for all of humanity. Welcome to our system. We hope this can be a peaceful meeting." Both aliens made sounds that might have been laughter, but not the kind that showed happiness. "Peaceful?" Lysara's light form flickered. "You think you have a choice in this matter? Your species is barely evolved. You have only just learned to leave your planet, yet you act like you belong among the stars." Zephyros nodded with all four of his arms. "The collective has studied your genetics. You are chaotic, uncontrolled. Your DNA changes randomly. You make decisions based on emotions instead of logic. This is dangerous. We have come to offer you guidance," Thisara continued. "The Vextai have mastered energy itself. We have evolved beyond the need for crude matter. Under our protection, your species can learn proper order." "The Morden Collective agrees," Zephyros added. "But we believe biological perfection is the answer. We have removed all genetic flaws from our species. We can do the same for you." Admiral Lee frowned. "What exactly are you offering?" "Surrender," both aliens said at the same time. The word hung in the air like a bad smell. Captain Jiwan felt her crew tense up around her. On Earth, she could see Admiral Lee's jaw tighten. Thisara continued speaking. "Give up your weapons. Stop your expansion into space. Return to your homeworld. We will divide your colonies between our empires. The Vextai will take the inner worlds. The Morden will take the outer colonies. You will be protected and guided," Zephyros added. "Your primitive technology will be replaced with proper systems. Your chaotic governments will be replaced with efficient control. Your children will be raised correctly." "And if we refuse?" Admiral Lee asked quietly. Both aliens glowed brighter. Their ships began moving closer to Earth. "Then you will be corrected," Thisara said. "The Vextai do not enjoy destroying primitive species, but we will not allow chaos to spread through the galaxy. The collective will remove the genetic flaws that make your species dangerous," Zephyros added. "This can be done peacefully, or it can be done by force." The transmission ended. The alien fleets moved into attack positions around Earth's solar system. The crystal ships formed perfect geometric patterns like deadly art in space. The bioships spread out like predators surrounding their prey. Captain Jiwan looked at her crew. Engineer Taemin Ryu was already checking weapon systems. Navigator Sujin Yang was calculating escape routes. Communications Officer Hana Kim was sending emergency messages to all human colonies. "Captain," Hana said, "I'm getting reports from our outer colonies. Similar fleets have appeared at Mars, Europa, and Titan. They're surrounding all our major settlements." On the main screen, Admiral Lee was talking quickly with his officers. Dr. Minsu Choi was pointing at star charts and shaking his head. The situation was clear. Humanity was completely surrounded. "Admiral," Jiwan said, "what are your orders?" Admiral Lee looked directly at her through the screen. His eyes were hard as steel. "Captain Park, prepare your fleet for battle. Send a message to all human ships and colonies. Tell them this: humanity bows to no one." The bridge of the Taguk went quiet for a moment. Then slowly everyone began to smile. They were facing two advanced alien civilizations with technology far beyond their own. They were outnumbered at least 10 to 1. The smart thing would be to surrender, but humans had never been good at doing the smart thing. "You heard the Admiral," Captain G1 announced to her crew. "Battle stations. Let's show these aliens what happens when you call humans primitive." The warning sirens began to sound throughout the ship. Red lights flashed as the crew prepared for war. Outside, the alien fleets waited, confident that the primitive humans would see reason and surrender. They were about to learn their first lesson about humanity. Never underestimate someone you've just insulted. High Commander Thisara, her own form flickering weakly in a damaged escape pod, sent one final transmission to the human fleet. "This is impossible. Hive Admiral Zephyros watched the destruction of the Vextai fleet through his bioship's living sensors. The organic walls of his command chamber pulsed with agitation as the collective mind processed what they had witnessed. The energy beings had been completely destroyed by the primitive humans using simple matter-based weapons. "This changes nothing," Zephyros announced to his collective. "The Vextai failed because they underestimated primitive kinetic weapons. But we have seen their tactics. We will not repeat their mistakes." Bioanalyst Kithmera's voice echoed through the ship's neural network. "Hive Admiral, the humans use chaotic strategies and unpredictable weapon combinations. Our bioships can adapt to any threat, but only if we can identify the pattern. Then we will force them to show us all their patterns at once," Zephyros decided. "Launch full assault on all human colonies simultaneously. When they try to defend everything, we will see every tactic they possess." The Mordoon Collective had learned the wrong lesson from watching the Vextai defeat. They believed the crystal ships had failed because they hadn't adapted quickly enough. But the Mordoon biotechnology could evolve during battle, growing new defenses and weapons in real time. They were confident that their superior biological engineering would overcome human chaos. This confidence was about to be tested in the worst possible way. Captain Seo-hyun An received the alert while commanding the Mars defense fleet from her flagship Red Planet's shield. The Mordoon bioships were moving toward all human colonies at once. Mars, Europa, Titan, the asteroid mining stations, even the small research outposts on Pluto. Communications Officer Boyoung Chai, "Get me General Nam on Luna Command," Seo-hyun ordered. "Captain An." General Woo-sung's voice came through clearly despite the distance. "The Mordoon are forcing us to split our forces. They want to see all our capabilities at once." "Then let's give them a show they'll never forget," Seo-hyun replied. "Are Dr. Yoon's biomechanical countermeasures ready?" "All ships have been equipped with the new systems. The Mordoon are about to learn why humans never fight clean." Dr. Haewon. Yoon had spent the last few hours studying fragments of Mordoon biotechnology that human ships had collected during the earlier skirmishes. What she discovered was both fascinating and terrifying. The alien bioships were more advanced than anything humanity had ever created, but they had one critical weakness. The Mordoon have eliminated all randomness from their biological systems, Dr. Haewon explained to the gathered fleet commanders through the neural network. Their ships can adapt and evolve, but only in predictable ways based on their genetic programming. Major Kyung-soo Im, commanding the ground forces on Mars, understood immediately. They've made themselves too perfect. No genetic variation means no ability to handle truly unexpected situations. Exactly, Dr. Haewon confirmed. So we're going to give them something their perfect genetics can't handle. Controlled chaos in biological form. The weapons Dr. Haewon had developed looked like ordinary missiles, but they contained something much more dangerous than explosives. Each warhead held billions of synthetic viruses, designed not to destroy the bioships, but to confuse them. Captain Seo-hyun watched through her sensors as the Mordoon fleet approached Mars. The bioships were magnificent in their alien beauty, living vessels that pulsed with organic light, their hulls covered in structures that looked like a cross between coral and machinery. Each ship was perfectly adapted for space combat, grown rather than built. "Target the lead bioship," Seo-hyun ordered. "Fire Confusion Protocol Alpha." Her ship launched what appeared to be a standard missile barrage. The Mordoon bioships responded exactly as Dr. Haewon had predicted. Their living hulls began growing new defensive structures to intercept the missiles. Thick organic armor sprouted across their surfaces. Bioweapons emerged from hidden chambers to shoot down the incoming projectiles. But these weren't ordinary missiles. When they struck the bioship's defenses, they released clouds of synthetic viruses that Dr. Haewon had designed to be the exact opposite of Mordoon perfection. Instead of following predictable genetic patterns, these viruses contained deliberately random DNA sequences. "What is happening to our vessels?" Hive Admiral Zephyros demanded as his ships began to behave strangely. Bioanalyst Kithmera's voice was filled with confusion. "The humans have released some form of biological agent, but it's not trying to kill our ships. It's making them confused. The synthetic viruses weren't designed to destroy the Mordoon bioships. Instead, they introduced random genetic information into the ship's biological systems. The perfectly programmed organic vessels suddenly began growing structures that served no purpose. Some ships sprouted extra weapons that fired in random directions. Others developed new organs that interfered with their existing systems. Fascinating, Dr. Haywan observed from her laboratory on Europa. The bioships are trying to adapt to the random genetic information, but their programming can't handle true randomness. They're evolving in directions that make no sense. Lieutenant Donghyuk Seo, coordinating the attack from his position on the heavy cruiser Europa's Hope, watched as Mordun bioships began to turn against each other. Some vessels had grown so many random structures that they could no longer tell friend from foe. Others had developed biological systems that contradicted their original programming. Deploy Evolution Accelerator Protocol, Seo-hyun ordered. This was Dr. Haywan's masterpiece of biological warfare. Instead of trying to destroy the Mordun ships directly, she had created weapons that forced them to evolve beyond their creator's control. The bioships, designed to adapt and change during battle, suddenly began evolving at incredible speeds, but in completely random directions. Our vessels are no longer responding to collective commands. Bioanalyst Kithmera reported in panic. They have developed independent biological systems that ignore our neural network. Hive Admiral Zephyros watched in horror as his perfect bioships became chaotic organic monsters. Some had grown so many weapons that they couldn't move properly. Others had developed brain-like structures that thought independently of the collective mind. A few had even begun attacking other Mordun ships, their accelerated evolution having turned them into something completely alien. Impossible, Zephyros declared. Our biotechnology is perfect. It cannot be corrupted by primitive genetic manipulation. That's your problem, Captain Seo-hyun replied over the communication channel. You made your biology too perfect. You forgot that evolution works best when it's messy and unpredictable. Meanwhile, on the ground installations of Mars, Major Kyung-soo Im was watching the bioships that had managed to land begin to literally fall apart. The Mordun ground forces, also affected by the synthetic viruses, were experiencing rapid evolutionary changes that made them unable to function as a military unit. Colonel Minji Huang, Kyung-soo called to his second-in-command, deploy the random mutation bombs. These weapons were Dr. Haywan's final gift to the Mordun collective. Instead of trying to kill the alien ground forces, they introduced so much random, genetic material that the perfectly evolved Mordun soldiers began changing faster than their minds could adapt. Some Mordun troops grew extra limbs that they didn't know how to use. Others developed sensory organs that overwhelmed them with information. A few actually evolved beyond their original species entirely, becoming something that could no longer communicate with their collective mind. This is biological chaos, Hive Admiral Zephyros protested as he watched his perfect army become a collection of confused mutants. Evolution should be controlled, directed, perfected. Evolution is never perfect, Dr. Haywan replied from her laboratory. That's what makes it so powerful. You tried to remove all the randomness that makes life adaptable, so we gave you back some randomness with interest. The battle was turning into a rout. Mordun bioships throughout the solar system were experiencing the same chaotic evolution. Their collective mind, designed to control perfectly programmed organisms, couldn't handle creatures that were changing faster than they could be commanded. Engineer Changmin Lim, working with Dr. Boyoung Chae on the research station orbiting Titan, activated the final phase of humanity's biological warfare campaign. They released clouds of what they called evolution bombs, weapons that didn't explode but instead created zones of accelerated genetic change. Any Mordun bioship that entered these zones began evolving so rapidly that it literally outgrew its original design in minutes. Ships that had taken years to grow and perfect became twisted organic sculptures that could barely remember their original purpose. Our collective is fragmenting, bioanalyst Kithmera screamed through the failing neural network. The bioships have evolved beyond our ability to communicate with them. Hive Admiral Zephyros realized with growing horror that his perfect biological collective was coming apart. The ships he had thought were perfectly adapted for any threat were now evolving into forms he didn't recognize. Some had become so complex that they couldn't function. Others had simplified themselves to the point where they were barely more than organic debris. Retreat, Zephyros ordered his remaining forces. All ships that can. General Woo-sung Nam stood in the Luna Command Center, watching dozens of screens that showed the entire solar system. The underground facility had been built inside the moon itself, protected by kilometers of rock and the most advanced shields humanity could create. From here, he could coordinate the defense of every human world and colony. "Sir," called out Communications Officer Nari Bai, "all fleet commanders are standing by for orders." Wusong looked at the tactical display. The Vextai crystal ships had formed perfect triangular formations around Earth. The Mordun bioships spread out in organic patterns near Mars and the outer colonies. Both alien fleets were exactly where human strategists wanted them. "Dr. Choi," Wusong said into his communicator, "are your special preparations ready?" On the screen, Dr. Minsu Choi nodded from his position aboard the command ship Hangang. "All ships have been equipped with the new systems. The aliens are about to learn why humans never fight fair." The plan was simple in concept but complex in execution. Instead of meeting both alien fleets in traditional space battles, humanity would use its greatest strength, the ability to think differently than anyone expected. Captain Ji-hoon Kang commanded a squadron of ships that looked like floating junkyards. The Miner's Hope asteroid breaker and 12 other vessels had started life as industrial equipment. Mining ships, cargo haulers, and construction platforms. To the aliens watching them, they looked like helpless civilian craft trying to run away. Engineering Officer Yuna Han, "Are the modifications ready?" Ji-hoon asked. Yuna grinned from her station. "Captain, these mining ships now pack more firepower than our old battleships, plus some surprises the aliens definitely won't expect." The modifications were brilliant in their simplicity. The mining lasers had been converted into weapons that could cut through any known armor. The cargo bays held new kinds of missiles that didn't explode. They did something much worse. The industrial fabricators had been turned into factories that could build weapons during battle. But the real secret weapon was something no alien species had ever encountered. Commander Sungmin sat in a special chamber aboard the flagship Taguk. His head was connected to a complex device that looked like a combination of computer circuits and living brain tissue. Around the human fleet, dozens of other commanders sat in identical chambers. "Dr. Nari Bai, is the network ready?" Sungmin asked. Dr. Nari checked her instruments. "All neural connections are stable. The AI-human hybrid network is online and functioning perfectly." This was humanity's greatest innovation. Unlike the Vextai, who existed as pure energy but thought in rigid patterns, or the Mordun, who shared a collective mind but followed genetic programming, humans had created something new. Individual human creativity connected through artificial intelligence networks. Each human commander could think independently, come up with crazy ideas, and make split-second decisions. But they were all connected through quantum-linked AI systems that shared information instantly across the entire fleet. It was chaos and order working together, something neither alien species could understand. "All ships," General Wusong announced from Luna Command, "execute Plan Primitive." The human response began in ways that confused both alien fleets immediately. "Captain." Ji-hoon's mining ships suddenly changed course and accelerated toward the Vextai fleet at impossible speeds. The alien sensors showed the ships were just converted industrial equipment, not warships. High Commander Thaisara ordered her forces to ignore them and focus on the real military vessels. This was exactly what Captain Ji-hoon hoped for. "Yuna, activate the kinetic cannons," he ordered. The mining ship suddenly bristled with weapons that fired chunks of solid metal at incredible speeds. Not energy beams or plasma bolts, just big pieces of iron and steel moving at nearly the speed of light. The Vextai energy shields, designed to absorb and redirect energy attacks, were useless against simple matter moving very fast. The first crystal ship to get hit simply shattered. The kinetic projectile punched through its energy field like it wasn't there, and smashed the crystalline structure into a million glowing pieces. "Impossible," Thaisara pulsed in angry red light. "Those are primitive kinetic weapons. No advanced species uses such crude technology." Meanwhile, near Mars, the Mordun bioships were facing their own surprise. Captain Hyun Woo Cha commanded the heavy cruiser Busan's Thunder, which appeared to be retreating from the alien fleet in panic. The bioships gave chase, their living hulls pulsing with excitement as they prepared to capture human vessels. Engineering Officer Jimin Lee, "Deploy the viral countermeasures," Hyun-woo ordered. The Busan's Thunder suddenly released a cloud of microscopic machines that looked like space dust. The Mordun bioships flew right through the cloud, their living sensors detecting no threat from such tiny particles. But these weren't ordinary machines. Dr. Yoon-ji Song had designed them based on human computer viruses, but made them work on biological systems. When they attached to the bioship's living hulls, they began rewriting the ship's genetic programming. "What is happening to our vessels?" Hive Admiral Zephyros demanded as his ships began to slow down and change course randomly. Bioanalyst Kithmera's voice was panicked. "The humans have released some kind of synthetic virus. It's not biological, but it's affecting our ship's nervous systems." The bioships, designed to adapt and evolve during battle, began evolving in directions their crews couldn't control. Some grew extra weapons that fired randomly. Others developed new organs that served no purpose. The ships were still alive, but they were no longer following orders. Back in the Luna Command Center, General Wusung watched both alien fleets struggle with tactics they had never encountered. The neural network was working perfectly, with human commanders sharing information and adapting their strategies in real time. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Donghyuk Seo, "the Vextai are trying to adapt their energy shields to block kinetic weapons, and the Morden are attempting to develop biological countermeasures to our synthetic viruses," added Communications Officer Nari. Bei Wusung smiled. "Perfect. Signal all ships, activate Phase 2. This was when humanity's real advantage became clear. Both alien species were trying to adapt to human tactics, but they were thinking like their own species. The Vextai were trying to find energy-based solutions to matter-based problems. The Morden were trying to find biological solutions to synthetic problems, but humans didn't think in just one way. The neural network allowed them to combine thousands of different approaches instantly. Captain Sujin Yang's reconnaissance ships suddenly appeared throughout both alien fleets, moving too fast for the confused aliens to target. These small ships carried another human innovation, weapons that worked differently every time they fired. "Target the lead Vextai command ship," Sujin ordered. "Fire Solution Alpha." Her ship launched what looked like a simple missile, but when it hit the crystal ship's shields, it didn't explode. Instead, it released a burst of electromagnetic energy that scrambled the ship's energy patterns. The beautiful crystal structure began to flicker and fade as its energy form became unstable. "Now, fire Solution Beta at the same target," Sujin continued. The second missile contained compressed matter that expanded rapidly when it hit the weakened energy field. The crystal ship, already struggling to maintain its energy form, couldn't handle solid matter appearing inside its structure. It collapsed into a pile of glowing dust. Throughout the battle, human ships used different combinations of kinetic weapons: electromagnetic pulses, synthetic viruses, matter compression devices, and weapons that hadn't existed an hour before. The industrial fabricators aboard the converted mining ships were building new kinds of ammunition in real time, based on what the neural network learned about alien defenses. "This is chaos," High Commander Thaisara declared as another of her ships fell to weapons she didn't understand. "Agreed," Hive Admiral Zephyros added as his bioships continued to malfunction. "These humans fight with no order, no predictable patterns. How can we defend against tactics that change every moment?" In the Luna Command Center, General Wusung heard these alien communications and laughed. "That's exactly the point. We're not fighting like an advanced civilization. We're fighting like humans." The first phase of the battle was almost over. The alien fleets that had arrived to easily crush a primitive species were now scattered and confused. Their advanced technology was useless against weapons and tactics they had never imagined. But the real test was still coming. Both alien species were about to learn that when humans got serious about fighting, being called primitive was just the beginning of their problems. First Contact Protocol. The alarm bells screamed across the bridge of the hegemony warship Eternal Dominion. Admiral Vorthak's four eyes widened as he stared at the readings on his command screen. Something had just appeared at the edge of their space. Something that should not exist. "Report." He barked at his communications officer, his scaled hands gripping the arms of his command chair. "Unknown vessels, Admiral. 200 ships emerging from hyperspace coordinates that our navigation computers say are impossible." Vorthak felt his throat sacs inflate with irritation. In 3,000 years of hegemony expansion, they had never encountered a species that could surprise them. The galaxy belonged to the Hegemony Council. 12 powerful alien races had joined together to rule over hundreds of lesser species. They had the best technology, the strongest weapons, and the most experienced military commanders in known space. "Show me," Vorthak commanded. The main screen flickered to life, displaying the tactical readout. The unknown ships were strange. They had sleek designs that looked almost organic, with smooth curves instead of the angular shapes that most spacefaring races preferred. Their hulls seemed to shift and change color as Vorthak watched, making it difficult to get accurate sensor readings. "What species are they?" Vorthak asked his intelligence officer. "Unknown, sir. The ship designs don't match anything in our databases. Their technology signatures are unusual." Vorthak's mandibles clicked together in thought. This was perfect. The hegemony was always looking for new species to conquer, fresh worlds to exploit, new technologies to steal, and more slaves to work in their factories. These unknown aliens had just delivered themselves right to his doorstep. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "All ships are to form attack formation. We'll give these newcomers a proper hegemony welcome." Around the Eternal Dominion, 2,000 hegemony warships began to move. They were massive vessels, some over 5 kilometers long, bristling with weapons and protected by energy shields that could deflect asteroid impacts. The combined firepower of the fleet could crack a planet's crust or boil away an ocean. Vorthak opened a communication channel to the unknown ships. His voice carried the arrogance of a species that had never known defeat. "Unknown vessels, you have entered hegemony space without permission. Surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your complete destruction." For a long moment there was only silence. Then a voice responded. It spoke in perfect hegemony standard, though the accent was strange. The voice belonged to a female, which surprised Vorthak. Most civilized species didn't let females command military vessels. "This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Human First Expeditionary Fleet. We are explorers, not conquerors. We suggest you reconsider your hostile posture." Vorthak laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Humans? Never heard of you. And I don't take suggestions from prey species. Last chance to surrender." "I see," came the calm reply. "Then perhaps a demonstration is in order." That was when everything went wrong. The human ships moved faster than anything Vorthak had ever seen. One moment they were holding position at the edge of sensor range. The next they were scattered throughout his formation, weaving between his massive warships like insects dancing around sleeping giants. "Fire! Fire everything!" Vorthak screamed. His gunners tried. The hegemony ships unleashed torrents of plasma fire, particle beams, and antimatter torpedoes. Enough firepower to level a city struck the space where the human ships had been. But they weren't there anymore. The human vessels seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Sensors would lock onto them for a split second, then lose them completely. When they reappeared, they were somewhere else entirely, usually behind a hegemony ship that was suddenly erupting in explosions. "How are they doing this?" Vorthak demanded. His science officer's voice was shaking. "I don't know, sir. Their ships appear to be using some kind of quantum displacement technology. They're not moving through normal space. They're stepping outside of it." A human ship materialized directly in front of the Eternal Dominion. It was tiny compared to Vorthak's flagship, no bigger than a hegemony fighter craft. But when it fired, the Eternal Dominion's shields collapsed instantly. The blast punched through 3 meters of armored hull like it was paper. Warning lights flashed across the bridge. "Shield generators offline. Hull breach on decks 40 through 50. Casualties mounting." Around them, the rest of the hegemony fleet was dying. The human ships moved with perfect coordination, as if they shared a single mind. They struck with surgical precision, targeting shield generators, weapon systems, and engines. They weren't trying to kill every hegemony soldier. They were demonstrating their complete superiority. A massive hegemony dreadnought, the pride of the Zephyrian Navy, suddenly went dark. All its lights died, its engines shut down, and it began to drift helplessly through space. "What happened to the Star Crusher?" Vorthak asked. "Unknown, sir. All their systems just stopped working. It's like their computers forgot how to function." More ships were suffering the same fate. The humans had weapons that could shut down technology itself. Weapons that reached through shields and armor to attack the very electronics that kept a ship alive. In less than an hour, the mighty hegemony fleet was reduced to drifting wreckage and disabled hulks. 2,000 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy had been neutralized by 200 vessels from a species that wasn't even in their databases. "Commander," Chen's voice came over the communication channel again. She still sounded perfectly calm, as if she had just finished a routine training exercise instead of demolishing the most powerful military force in the sector. "Admiral Vorthak, your fleet is disabled but not destroyed. Your crews are alive. This was a demonstration of human capability, not human cruelty. We could have annihilated you completely, but we chose restraint. Vorthak tried to speak, but his throat sacs had contracted with fear. He had never experienced defeat before. None of his species had, not in living memory. "We know about the Hegemony Council," Chen continued. "We know about your empire, your conquered worlds, your slave species. We've been watching you for longer than you might think." This was our way of introducing ourselves. What do you want?" Vorthak finally managed to croak. "Nothing from you, Admiral. We're not conquerors. We're explorers. But we won't tolerate threats to innocent species. The hegemony's expansion ends now. Any further aggression against developing civilizations will be met with appropriate response." The human ships began to withdraw, moving back toward the edge of the system. But before they disappeared into hyperspace, Commander Chen delivered one final message. "Tell your council what happened here. Tell them that Earth remembers every species you've enslaved, every world you've strip-mined, every civilization you've destroyed. We suggest you reconsider your expansion plans. This fleet was just our introduction. Next time we might not be so gentle." The human ships vanished, leaving behind only the floating wreckage of hegemony pride and a new understanding of humanity's place in the galaxy. They weren't the primitive species that Vorthak had expected to conquer. They were something far more dangerous. They were something that could fight back. As rescue ships arrived to collect the survivors, Vorthak stared out at the empty space where the human fleet had been. He had one terrible thought that he couldn't shake. If this was just their introduction, what would happen when they got serious? The Hegemony's response. The emergency session of the Hegemony Council had been going on for 6 hours. In the great chamber on the capital world of Nexus Prime, representatives from 12 powerful alien species argued and shouted at each other in a dozen different languages. The universal translators were working overtime. High Chancellor Mordak, a towering insectoid creature with 6 arms and compound eyes, slammed his ceremonial staff against the floor. The sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. "Silence," he commanded. "We are here to discuss the human problem, not to bicker like children." The chamber fell quiet. Around the circular table, the most powerful beings in the galaxy turned their attention to the holographic display in the center. It showed the wreckage of Admiral Vorthak's fleet, floating in the darkness of space like broken toys. 2,000 ships, said Council Member Zexara, her reptilian features twisted in disbelief. 2,000 of our finest warships defeated by 200 primitive vessels from an unknown species. "They are not primitive," Admiral Vorthak said from his seat at the table. The proud Kethani warrior looked like he had aged a decade in the past week. His scales had lost their shine and his 4 eyes were dull with shame. "Their technology is beyond anything we've ever encountered." Council Member Thyros, representing the Machine Intelligence Collective, processed data at lightning speed before speaking. "Analysis of the wreckage confirms anomalous technology signatures. The humans appear to use quantum manipulation at the molecular level. Their weapons ignore conventional physics." High Chancellor Mordak's mandibles clicked together in frustration. "Impossible. We have explored this galaxy for millennia. We know every spacefaring species. Where did these humans come from?" "Unknown," replied Intelligence Director Vexhan. "Our deep space monitoring stations have no record of their home system. It's as if they appeared from nowhere." The hegemony had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. In that time, they had conquered over 400 species and claimed ownership of tens of thousands of worlds. Their military might was absolute. Their technology was supreme. No species had ever successfully resisted them, until now. "What do we know about their homeworld?" asked Council Member Korthak, his massive frame shifting in his specially built chair. "Very little," Vexhan admitted. "Our long-range sensors have identified a system they call Sol, approximately 27,000 light-years from our core territories. Initial scans suggest a single inhabited world with a population of roughly 8 billion. 8 billion? Mordak's compound eyes glittered with interest. That's a substantial population for a single world. They must be overcrowded and resource-depleted, perfect for conquest and exploitation." Admiral Vorthak shifted uncomfortably. "High Chancellor, I must advise caution. These humans demonstrated capabilities that what?" Mordak interrupted. "That surprised and unprepared patrol fleet? You were caught off guard, Admiral. That won't happen again." The High Chancellor activated the main display, showing a tactical overview of hegemony space. Red dots marked the positions of military bases, shipyards, and fortress worlds. The display was overwhelming in its scope. The humans caught us by surprise once, Mordak declared. But surprise only works when your enemy doesn't know it's coming. We will mobilize the largest military force in galactic history. Every member species will contribute their finest warships. We will assemble a fleet so massive that it will blot out the stars. Around the table, the council members nodded in agreement. This was what the hegemony did best. When faced with resistance, they applied overwhelming force. It had worked against every other species in the galaxy. How many ships? Asked Admiral Tharek, the hegemony's supreme military commander. 50,000, Mordak replied without hesitation. The combined might of our entire military. Every battleship, every carrier, every dreadnought. We will teach these humans what it means to threaten the hegemony. The mobilization began immediately. Across 12 homeworlds and hundreds of colonies, the call went out. Every spacefaring vessel capable of mounting weapons was pressed into service. Military academies graduated their cadets early. Shipyards worked around the clock to outfit civilian vessels with armor and guns. The species of the hegemony might argue about politics and territory, but they all agreed on one thing. No primitive upstart race would be allowed to threaten their dominance. Admiral Vextar of the Zephyrian Empire was chosen to lead the Grand Armada. He was a veteran of 50 campaigns, a brilliant tactician who had never lost a battle. His flagship, the Galaxy's Edge, was a mobile fortress armed with weapons that could crack a moon in half. As the massive fleet assembled in the Nexus system, beings across the galaxy watched in awe. The combined armada stretched for millions of kilometers through space. The smallest ships were the size of cities. The largest were mobile worlds, bristling with enough firepower to sterilize entire star systems. This is excessive, Admiral Vorthak said privately to Vextar as they stood on the bridge of the Galaxy's Edge. The humans demonstrated restraint in our first encounter. Perhaps diplomacy. Diplomacy is for equals, Vextar replied coldly. These humans will learn their place in the galactic order. Beneath us. The journey to Earth took 3 weeks. 50,000 ships moved through hyperspace in perfect formation, their commanders confident in their overwhelming superiority. They had studied every piece of data from the first encounter. They had developed countermeasures for the human quantum displacement technology. They had weapons specifically designed to penetrate exotic defenses. When they emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, they expected to find a single blue world orbiting a yellow star. What they found instead changed everything. Report, Vextar commanded as alarms began sounding across his bridge. Sir, I'm reading massive artificial structures throughout the system. Orbital platforms around the third planet, space stations the size of moons, and sir, the shipyards. The main screen showed Earth in the distance, but it was barely visible through the massive orbital infrastructure surrounding it. Shipyards stretched for thousands of kilometers, their construction bays large enough to build vessels that dwarfed anything in the hegemony fleet. Defense platforms floated in perfect geometric patterns, their weapon arrays tracking the hegemony ships with mechanical precision. How many ships? Vextar asked quietly. I can't get an accurate count, sir. The orbital facilities are blocking our sensors. But sir, some of those structures are larger than our biggest dreadnoughts. Vextar's confidence began to crack. This wasn't the primitive world they had expected. This was a fortress system that made their core worlds look like frontier outposts. Signal the fleet, he ordered. All ships are to maintain formation and advance on the third planet. We'll overwhelm their defenses with concentrated firepower. But as the hegemony armada moved deeper into the system, something impossible happened. The orbital platforms began to fire. The beams that lanced out from Earth's defenses weren't like any weapon the hegemony had ever seen. They moved faster than light itself, striking targets before the energy signatures even registered on sensors. When they hit hegemony ships, the results were catastrophic. A Kethani battleship simply vanished, consumed by a beam of pure annihilation. A Therian carrier fleet disintegrated as exotic particles ate through their hulls at the molecular level. The Zephyrian heavy cruiser Stormlord was hit by something that aged its hull 10,000 years in an instant, turning advanced alloys into cosmic dust. Shields. Get the shields up, Vextar screamed. They're not working, sir. The beams are passing through them like they don't exist. Around them, 50,000 of the most powerful warships in the galaxy were being systematically destroyed by weapons that shouldn't exist. The humans weren't even using ships. Their planetary defenses alone were more powerful than the combined might of the hegemony. In less than an hour, The greatest military force in galactic history was reduced to floating debris. Vexter found himself alone on the bridge of his dying flagship, watching as his life support systems failed one by one. A human voice came over the communication system. It was calm, almost gentle. "This is Earth Defense Command. The few surviving vessels are free to return home. Consider this our second demonstration. Next time, we might not be so understanding." As his ship's emergency systems carried him toward the edge of the system, Vextar had one terrible realization. They had just attacked the wrong species. The revelation, Doctor? Cathara had been working in the deep archives for 18 hours straight. Her 4 eyes burned from staring at ancient texts, and her tentacles ached from manipulating the delicate scanning equipment. But she couldn't stop. Not when she was so close to an answer. The destruction of the Great Armada had shaken the hegemony to its core. 50,000 ships gone in an hour. The most powerful military force in galactic history had been swatted aside like insects by a species that wasn't even supposed to exist. The surviving officers told impossible stories. Weapons that ignored the laws of physics. Defenses that aged matter itself. Technology that seemed almost like magic to even the most advanced hegemony scientists. As the hegemony's chief xenoarchaeologist, Cathara had been given access to the oldest records in the galaxy. Documents that predated the rise of the current galactic civilization by millions of years. Most of her colleagues dismissed these ancient texts as mythology, but Cathara had always believed that truth could be found in the oldest stories. She pulled up another file on her workstation. This one was written in Old Therian, a dead language that only a few scholars still understood. The text was damaged, with whole sections missing, but what remained made her blood run cold. And so the builders departed, leaving behind empty worlds and sleeping machines. But the ancient prophecies speak of their return, when the galaxy forgets its place and chaos threatens the order they established. In that day, the sons and daughters of the builders will emerge from their exile, and the pretenders will remember who the true masters are. Cathara's tentacles trembled as she accessed the next document. This one was even older, carved into stone tablets found on a dead world at the galaxy's edge. The symbols were so ancient that the universal translator could barely make sense of them. The first ones walk between the stars as easily as others walk between rooms. Space bends to their will. Time flows at their command. Matter obeys their wishes. They are the architects of reality, the shapers of worlds, the masters of the quantum foam. She had been finding references like this for hours, scattered across dozens of different worlds, written by species that had died out millions of years before the hegemony was even formed. All of them spoke of the same thing: the builders. The first ones, the masters of technology so advanced that it seemed like divine power to lesser beings. Cathara pulled up the sensor data from the human encounter. The quantum displacement signatures, the reality-altering weapons, the technology that operated outside known physics. She ran it through her analysis programs, comparing it to the ancient descriptions. The match was perfect. Her communication device chimed. She answered it without looking away from her screens. "Dr. Cathara?" The voice belonged to her assistant, Veltum. "You need to see this. We're getting reports from the border systems. Human ships have been spotted." "How many ships?" Cathara asked. "That's just it, Doctor. It's not a fleet. It's just a few ships, but they're different. They're not like the vessels that destroyed our Armada. These ones are smaller, sleeker. And Doctor, they're not using hyperspace. They're just appearing." Cathara felt her hearts racing. "Send me the sensor data immediately." The files arrived within minutes. Cathara studied the readings with growing excitement and terror. The human ships weren't moving through normal space at all. They were phasing in and out of reality itself, stepping between dimensions like beings from myth, just like the ancient texts described. Her hands shook as she opened a secure channel to the Hegemony Council. High Chancellor Mordak answered immediately, his compound eyes reflecting his desperation. "Dr. Cathara, please tell me you found something, anything that can explain what we're facing." "I have, High Chancellor," she replied, "but you're not going to like it." She transmitted her findings to the council chambers. Ancient texts appeared on screens throughout the building, accompanied by her analysis of the human technology signatures. "The humans aren't a new spacefaring species," she explained. "They're the descendants of the builders, the first ones, the original masters of this galaxy." The silence that followed was deafening. That's impossible, Mordak said finally. The builders are mythology. Stories told by primitive species to explain natural phenomena. The evidence says otherwise, Cathera replied. Every piece of human technology matches the ancient descriptions perfectly. Quantum manipulation, reality alteration, dimensional phasing. These aren't new inventions, Chancellor. They're inherited knowledge. She highlighted specific passages from the texts. Look at this description of builder vessels. Ships that dance between the spaces of reality, untouchable by conventional weapons. Compare that to what our surviving officers reported about the human fleet. More silence from the council chamber. But if they're the builders, said council member Zexara slowly, then why did they leave? Why did they abandon the galaxy? Kithara had been wondering about that too. She pulled up another set of documents, these ones describing great wars between species that had achieved godlike power. From what I can piece together, the builders reached a level of technological advancement that threatened reality itself. Their wars were tearing holes in space-time. They were becoming a danger to the universe, so they imposed exile upon themselves. They retreated to hidden worlds and waited. Waited for what? Mordak demanded. For the galaxy to mature. For younger species to develop wisdom along with power. But Chancellor, that's not what happened. Instead, we created the hegemony. We became conquerors and slavers. We proved that we learned nothing from their example. The truth was spreading through the hegemony like wildfire. Emergency sessions were being called on every member world. Scientists were confirming Kithara's findings. The humans weren't just another alien species. They were the return of legends made real. That's when the human diplomatic ships arrived. They appeared without warning in the heart of hegemony space, phasing into existence directly above the capital world of Nexus Prime. The ships were beautiful, with hulls that seemed to be made of crystallized starlight. They ignored the frantic defensive fire from orbital platforms, the energy beams passing through them without effect. A communication channel opened to the council chambers. "This is Ambassador Marcus Webb of the Terran Commonwealth," said a calm human voice. "We request an immediate audience with the hegemony leadership." High Chancellor Mordak found himself in the unprecedented position of having to negotiate with beings who could simply ignore his defenses. The human ships could have destroyed Nexus Prime with ease, but instead they waited patiently in orbit, their weapons powered down. "What do you want?" Mordak asked. "To prevent unnecessary bloodshed," Ambassador Webb replied. "We know what you've discovered about our heritage. Yes, we are the children of those you call the builders, and yes, we have returned to active participation in galactic affairs." "Why now?" Mordak demanded. "Why reveal yourselves?" "Because you've reached a crossroads, Chancellor. Your empire has grown powerful enough to threaten other developing species, but you haven't grown wise enough to use that power responsibly. The same mistake that led to our ancestors' exile." Through the viewing ports of the council chamber, Mordak could see the human ships hanging in space like impossible dreams. They were tiny compared to hegemony dreadnoughts, but he knew now that size meant nothing. These vessels commanded forces that could reshape reality itself. "What do you propose?" he asked quietly. "Integration," Webb replied. "Not conquest. Not subjugation. A new galactic community based on cooperation instead of domination. The hegemony's expansion ends now. Your member species will have the choice to join the Commonwealth or remain independent. But the age of forced conquest is over. And if we refuse?" The human ambassador was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of eons. "Then you will discover why our ancestors chose exile over war. The demonstration you witnessed at Earth was our defensive systems operating at minimum power. You have not yet seen what we can do when we choose to act instead of react." As if to punctuate his words, more human ships began appearing throughout hegemony space. Not fleets, but individual vessels that phased into existence above major worlds and military bases. Each one was different, with designs that seemed to shift and change as they moved. The message was clear. The humans could be anywhere, anytime. The hegemony's vast empire was no longer their own. Dr. Kithera watched from her archive chamber as history unfolded. The ancient prophecies were coming true. The children of the builders had returned, and the galaxy would never be the same. How the 10 fleets unveiled. The war declaration came exactly 1 week after Ambassador Webb's ultimatum expired. High Chancellor Mordak stood before the emergency assembly of the Hegemony Council, his compound eyes burning with desperate fury. Behind him, holographic displays showed the chaos spreading across their empire. Member species were in revolt. Colonial governors were declaring independence. Military commanders were defecting to join something called the Terran Commonwealth. They gave us no choice, Mordak declared to the assembled representatives. The humans demand our complete surrender. They want us to abandon everything our ancestors built. They expect us to bow down to them like slaves. Around the great chamber, voices rose in anger and fear. The proud species of the hegemony had never known defeat. The very idea of submission to another power was unthinkable. We still have our core fleets, Admiral Thirek reported. Nearly 2 million ships scattered across our territory. If we can bring them together, no, interrupted Dr. Kethera from her place at the Research Council table. You don't understand what we're facing. The humans aren't just technologically superior. They're operating on a completely different level of reality. Mordak's mandibles clicked in irritation. Enough of your ancient mythology, Doctor. These humans bleed and die like any other species. We've captured some of their people from disabled ships. They're flesh and blood, not gods. Their bodies may be mortal, Kethara replied. But their technology transcends physical limitations. You're planning to fight entities that can manipulate space-time itself. The debate continued for hours, but the outcome was inevitable. The hegemony had never backed down from a fight, and they wouldn't start now. The war declaration was unanimous. Within days, conscription orders went out across the Empire. Every species capable of space travel was required to contribute their ships and crews to the war effort. Civilian vessels were retrofitted with weapons. Ancient warships were pulled out of mothballs. Even obsolete patrol craft were pressed into service. The call was answered by billions of beings, Kethani warriors who lived for battle, Therian machine intelligences with no concept of fear, Zephyrian pilots who considered death in combat the highest honor. They came from 1,000 worlds, united by their refusal to kneel before the returning masters of the galaxy. Admiral Thirek took command of the greatest military force ever assembled. 5 million ships of every class and configuration, dreadnoughts that could shatter planets, carrier fleets with fighter squadrons numbering in the millions, support vessels carrying enough ammunition to wage war for decades. This is it, Thirek announced to his assembled fleet commanders. The final battle for the future of our civilization. We may be outgunned, but we are not outnumbered. For every human ship, we have 1,000. Today we show these ancient pretenders that the galaxy belongs to us now. The massive Armada began its advance toward human space, confident that sheer numbers would overcome even the most advanced technology. They moved in formation through hyperspace, their combined mass creating gravitational distortions that could be detected from star systems away. But when they emerged from hyperspace at the coordinates where Earth's solar system should have been, they found only empty space. Navigation error? Thirek demanded. No, sir, his helmsman replied, checking and rechecking his instruments. These are the correct coordinates, but there's no star, no planets, nothing. Thirek felt the first touch of real fear. A star system didn't just disappear. Even with their advanced technology, the humans couldn't have moved an entire solar system. Could they? Sir, called his sensor officer. I'm detecting massive spatial distortions throughout this region. It's like reality itself is unstable. That's when the first human fleet appeared. It didn't emerge from hyperspace like a normal fleet. Instead, it seemed to unfold from dimensions that shouldn't exist. Ships materialized out of nothingness, their hulls gleaming with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. Ghost Fleet, came a calm voice over the communication channels. Designation, stealth and infiltration. You are trespassing in Commonwealth space. The human ships were unlike anything the hegemony had seen before. They flickered in and out of visible existence, phasing between dimensions. When hegemony weapons fired at them, the energy beams passed harmlessly through empty space. But the human return fire was devastatingly real. Invisible weapons reached out to touch hegemony ships, and wherever they struck, the vessels simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, not vaporized, They were erased from reality as if they had never been built. All ships, evasive maneuvers, Thirek ordered. Concentrate fire on. He never finished the sentence. A second human fleet had appeared behind them. This one was different. Massive ships that dwarfed even the largest hegemony dreadnoughts. Their hulls were black as space itself, and strange energies crackled between weapon arrays that defied description. Titan Fleet, announced another voice. Designation, World Crackers. Stand down immediately or face complete annihilation. Admiral Thirek had commanded fleets for over a century. He had seen weapons that could melt continents and shields that could deflect stellar radiation. But nothing, in his experience, had prepared him for what the Titan Fleet unleashed. A single shot from one of their weapons struck a hegemony battle group. 10,000 ships, including 3 super dreadnoughts, simply vanished in a flash of impossible light. When Thirek's sensors cleared, there wasn't even debris left behind. The ships had been reduced to their component atoms and scattered across light years of space. Third Fleet incoming, his tactical officer reported in a voice that had lost all hope. The Phoenix Fleet materialized from what appeared to be burning stars. Their ships were smaller than the Titans, but they moved like living things. As Thirek watched in horror, the Phoenix ships began to replicate themselves. 1 became 2, 2 became 4, 4 became 8. Within minutes, the human fleet had grown from a few hundred vessels to tens of thousands. Self-replicating warships, his science officer whispered. They're building an entire army from raw energy. More fleets kept appearing. The Void Fleet emerged from black holes that opened in normal space. The Storm Fleet rode waves of exotic matter that turned space itself into a weapon. The Crystal Fleet sang songs that shattered hegemony hulls at the molecular level. Each fleet was different. Each one represented a different aspect of human military doctrine, and each one was more impossible than the last. How many? Thirek asked weakly. 10 fleets total, sir, his sensor officer reported. Each one larger than our entire armada. The human fleet surrounded the hegemony forces like a sphere of deadly stars. Admiral Thirek found himself facing down technology that made his own weapons look like stone knives. Beings who had inherited the power of gods and learned to wield it with precision. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Defense Force, came a new voice. Admiral Thirek, you are completely surrounded and outgunned. Your forces are no match for our capabilities. I'm offering you one chance to surrender. Thirek looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. Beings from a dozen different species, all united in their shock and terror. They had come here expecting to fight ships and soldiers. Instead, they found themselves facing forces that could rewrite the laws of physics. You said 10 fleets, Thirek said slowly. Are these all of your military forces? There was a pause before Admiral Chen replied. And when she did, Thirek could hear something that might have been amusement in her voice. Admiral, these 10 fleets represent our local defense force, what you call our home guard. The majority of human military assets are deployed elsewhere in the galaxy, maintaining peace and protecting developing civilizations. The words hit Thirek like a physical blow. Everything they had seen, all this, impossible technology and overwhelming firepower, was just Earth's neighborhood watch. The humans had forces so vast and powerful that they could simultaneously police an entire galaxy while maintaining enough ships to crush the hegemony without effort. I surrender, Thirek said quietly. All ships, stand down weapons and prepare. To be boarded, came the order across hegemony communication channels. As human vessels moved to take control of the surrendering fleet, Thirek had one final, terrible realization. The humans hadn't needed to reveal their 10 fleets. They could have ended the war with their orbital defenses alone. This had been a demonstration. A message to the galaxy that the age of conquest was truly over. The children of the builders had returned, and they had brought peace at the point of a sword that could cut through reality itself. New Galactic Order. The surrender ceremony took place in the ruins of the hegemony's greatest military academy, on Nexus Prime. Admiral Thirek stood before a simple table, his proud uniform stripped of medals and rank insignia. Across from him sat Ambassador Marcus Webb, looking remarkably ordinary for someone representing beings who could reshape reality. The war is over, Webb said simply. Your fleets have been disabled, not destroyed. Your crews are alive and will be returned to their homeworlds, but the hegemony as a political entity ceases to exist as of this moment. High Chancellor Mordak, his compound eyes dim with defeat, signed the surrender documents with shaking claws. Around him, the council members who had once ruled hundreds of worlds now sat in stunned silence. "What happens to our people?" Mordak asked. "That depends on them," Webb replied. "Each species will be given a choice. They can join the Terran Commonwealth as equal members, or they can maintain their independence under Commonwealth protection. What they cannot do is continue the practices of conquest and subjugation." Dr. Kithara, who had been quietly observing from the side of the room, stepped forward. "Ambassador, may I ask a question?" Webb nodded. "Of course, Doctor. Your research into the Builder archives has been invaluable. The ancient texts speak of your ancestors' power to alter reality itself. We've seen glimpses of this technology, but I suspect we've barely scratched the surface. How much of your true capability have you revealed?" Webb was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer. "Doctor, what you've witnessed represents perhaps 1% of human technological capability. The fleets that defeated your armada were equipped with what we consider basic defensive systems." The words fell like stones into a silent pool. Even after everything they had seen, the humans had been holding back. "Then why?" Mordak demanded. "If you have such power, why not simply impose your will on the galaxy? Why offer choices and negotiations? Because power without wisdom is exactly what led to our ancestors' exile," Webb explained. "They became so advanced that they nearly destroyed the universe itself with their wars. We inherited their knowledge, but we also learned from their mistakes." He gestured to a wall display showing star charts of the galaxy. "Humans could have returned centuries ago and simply taken control. We chose instead to watch and wait, hoping that younger species would develop the wisdom to use power responsibly. When we saw the hegemony expanding through conquest and slavery, we knew it was time to intervene." Over the following weeks, the transformation began. Human ships appeared throughout former hegemony space, but they came bearing aid rather than weapons. Medical vessels brought cures for diseases that had plagued species for millennia. Engineering ships provided clean energy technology that ended resource wars overnight. Agricultural vessels shared knowledge that could feed entire worlds. The conquered species of the former hegemony were given a choice that many of them had never expected to receive: freedom. On the industrial world of Carthax, where the Therian machines had enslaved biological workers for generations, human mediators helped to negotiate the release of billions of sentient beings. The Therians, faced with proof that biological and artificial intelligence could coexist peacefully, agreed to abandon their practices of organic servitude. On the mining colonies of the Zephyrian Empire, human terraforming technology restored worlds that had been strip-mined to barren rock. Former slaves found themselves the owners of fertile planets, supported by Commonwealth resources as they built new societies. The process wasn't always smooth. Some species, particularly the more aggressive members of the former hegemony, resisted the changes. The Cathani warrior caste declared that they would rather die than submit to human authority. The human response was typically unexpected. Instead of crushing the Cathani resistance, the Commonwealth offered them a different path. Human military advisors helped establish the Cathani Honor Guard, an elite force dedicated to protecting smaller species from external threats. The warriors found purpose in their traditional role as fighters, but now they served as protectors rather than conquerors. Dr. Kithara was appointed as the first director of the Galactic Archive Project, a massive effort to preserve and study the history of all known species. Working with human scholars, she began to piece together a more complete picture of galactic history. "It's remarkable," she told Ambassador Webb during one of their regular meetings. "The ancient texts were right about everything. Your ancestors really did shape the fundamental structure of this galaxy, the hyperspace routes we use, the stable zones where civilizations developed, even the distribution of habitable worlds. All of it was planned," Webb nodded. "The builders were gardeners as much as they were engineers. They seeded the galaxy with the potential for life and intelligence, then stepped back to let it grow naturally." "But you're back now," Kithara observed. "What does that mean for the future?" "It means we've entered a new phase of galactic development," Webb explained. "The Commonwealth isn't an empire in the traditional sense. We're more like shepherds. Our role is to guide and protect, not to rule. The proof of this philosophy became evident as the months passed. Human technology spread throughout the galaxy, but always with education and understanding rather than dependence. Species that joined the Commonwealth weren't absorbed into human culture. Instead, they were encouraged to develop their own unique contributions to galactic civilization. The Therian machine intelligences became master architects, designing space habitats that could house millions of beings in perfect harmony. The artistic Veltari created beauty that moved beings to tears across species barriers. The methodical Korthani became the galaxy's finest teachers, spreading knowledge with infinite patience. But perhaps the most remarkable change was in humanity itself. During a state visit to the Commonwealth capital on New Geneva, Dr. Cathara was given a tour of human civilization. What she saw defied her expectations entirely. Human society had evolved far beyond anything she could have imagined. Their cities floated in space, connected by streams of light that carried matter and energy instantaneously across vast distances. Their people lived for centuries, their bodies enhanced by technology that made them stronger, smarter, and more resilient while keeping them fundamentally human. "This is just one of our core worlds," explained her guide, a woman named Elena Santos who appeared to be in her 30s but claimed to be over 400 years old. "We have thousands of colonies, many of them in dimensions parallel to this one." They visited research stations where human scientists worked to understand the deepest mysteries of existence. Art galleries where creators used controlled black holes as paintbrushes. Schools where children learned to manipulate matter at the atomic level as easily as their ancestors had learned to write. "How long have you been this advanced?" Cathara asked. "We began our expansion beyond normal space-time about 3,000 years ago," Elena replied. "Around the same time the hegemony was forming, actually. We've been watching your development ever since." "And the 10 fleets that ended the war?" Elena smiled. "Those were training vessels. Ships we used to teach our children basic defensive techniques. The revelation was staggering. Everything the hegemony had seen, all the impossible technology and overwhelming power, had been the equivalent of a school exercise for human civilization." As Cathara's tour continued, she began to understand the true scope of human achievement. They had colonies in other galaxies connected by pathways that bypassed normal space entirely. They had learned to communicate with the fundamental forces of the universe. They had achieved a form of immortality that preserved consciousness across multiple incarnations. And yet, for all their godlike power, they remained remarkably human. They laughed and loved and dreamed just like any other species. They struggled with questions of meaning and purpose. They made mistakes and learned from them. "Why reveal all this to me?" Cathara asked as their tour concluded. "Because someone needs to record it," Elena replied. "The galaxy is entering a new age, Doctor. An age where the impossible becomes routine, where species work together instead of fighting each other, where the promise of the ancient builders is finally fulfilled." "And what comes after that?" Elena gazed out at the stars visible through the transparent walls of the station. "After that, Doctor, we take the next step. The builders explored one galaxy. We're preparing to explore the universe." As Cathara returned to her homeworld, she carried with her the knowledge that would reshape how every species understood their place in the cosmos. The humans weren't just the returning masters of the galaxy. They were the next stage of evolution itself. The war that had begun with humanity revealing one fleet had ended with the transformation of galactic civilization. And this, they assured her, was only the beginning. In the depths of space beyond the reach of any sensor, massive structures began to move. Ships that were themselves entire dimensions, carrying exploration fleets toward distant galaxies. The children of the builders were ready to claim their inheritance. Not just one galaxy, but the entire universe itself. The age of conquest was over. The age of exploration had begun.